Hi everyone, Shalom. Tabory here, and I just landed a few hours ago in Sydney, Australia. So I apologize here for just getting off the plane, but it's very exciting to be here and to say some words of Torah. My topic for this shiur is the topic is Shelot Chatiyot, questions that came up during the Gaza war. And before I go into the questions that came up, I just want to talk about the phenomenon of guys asking questions during a war. The past few months, the rabbis of Eretz, amongst me and some other rabbis, have received questions. Amongst them, questions that have to do with taking bounty, shalal, leaving on Shabbat, before Shabbat, to go visit the family. An interesting question came up about taking a haircut before Lag BaOmer as they were going to Gaza. Different questions came up during the war, eating treif, eating non-kosher food in Gaza. But before we go into the questions themselves, I think it's so important to focus on the fact that boys that are fighting right now, chayalim, that are in the Israeli army, students of ours, alumni of ours, as well as obviously many others from all over the world and from Israel, are asking she'ilot chatiot with the understanding that the answer could be no. One of our students at some point called me up and asked the following question. He said that he hasn't seen his wife for some time, and the army told him that he can go home for Shabbat, but he would have to come back Shabbat morning back to the base. He asked me, what do I do? Am I allowed to go home Friday afternoon, knowing that in a few hours I have to drive back? When I leave the base, I know that I'm going to have to break Shabbat to come back. So I'm not going to go right now into this question. There's an interesting discussion about this in the Gemara and the Poskim. And this question, by the way, has ramifications for doctors, for nurses. It has interesting ramifications for people that deal with saving lives on a routine level. So I'm not going to go into the details of this question, but what I was thinking at the time when he asked me the question was, wow. And if I were to tell him that according to halacha, he's not allowed to go home, he wouldn't go home. Meaning he took that into account. I don't know if everyone and everybody would ask the question. Some people just feel, okay, the army let you out, go home. But the fact that there are soldiers out there that with all the difficulties that they're going through have the mind to ask halachic questions. And again, it's not just to ask the questions, it's to be aware that if the answer is no, then the answer is no. This question, by the way, about leaving to go home to see family and coming back on Shabbat, during Shabbat, leaving, coming back and forth, has been actually discussed quite a lot by the poskim, by the rabbis the past few months. And I'll just say that one of the main reasons that rabbis have been so lenient in this area, even though in the past they haven't, is because of the importance of boosting morale. Boosting morale is an idea that we are all aware of and how important it is to war efforts. Just this week, just yesterday, 2 days ago, when we were all given the wonderful news about the miraculous operation, which led to 4 of our hostages being let free. You felt how everyone was, for a few minutes, so happy, so pleased, so delighted, so excited. People were saying mizmorim of tehillim, of thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. People were making brachot, atov v'ametiv. There was a feeling wow, look at our Israeli army. Look what they did. How amazing. What a miracle. And we all know that such an attitude, such an atmosphere, could do so good to the efforts of the war, which could lead to victory. And being pessimist, being a pessimist, and being depressed, and being down, and being negative, Chas v'shalom can lead to defeat. The rabbis have realized that we must take this into consideration, and therefore, even uh, even though until now this would not have been such a big factor in halachic decision making, this past war, I feel that very strongly how the rabbis have considered this, have taken this into consideration, and realized that, for example, how important it is for soldiers to see their families, to see their wives, to see their children, to see their parents, and the effect that such a meeting can have on the soldiers, and maybe even on the people, by the way, it's not just the soldiers, the effect that it has on the morale of the people, of how soldiers receive strength, koach, otzma, gvura, from these meetings, that they justified for it even breaking Shabbat. This is a long, ongoing discussion about what we are allowed to do in the name of morale when it comes to halachic questions. I once discussed in the past that this was the main reason why during the Yom Kippur War, it was permitted to move bodies on Shabbat, again, because of the negative results that having Israeli soldiers lying in the field were doing to the morale, that it led the rabbis to realize that it is needed to do such a thing. During this war, if you remember the beginning of the war, there were a lot of weddings that were postponed, a lot of weddings that were, the soldiers were in the army, and not only the chatanim, also the kalot, and weddings were postponed. And then at some point, there became a custom that chayalim were getting married on bases. They were getting married within hours that they were giving notice that they had a few hours off. They were getting married in a very quick marriage, and it became almost like a shtick to get married on base, to get married in wearing Israeli uniform. And I think that this is not necessarily a halachic question, but I think that it does touch upon a religious question, which is what is this the right time during wartime? Is it the correct and right time for people to get married? This is not just about marriage, but it also reflects, I believe, a deeper insight to what many of us are going through during this war. Those of us who are not fighting, or not participating in the battle itself, but feel a strong connection to what's going on. How do we relate to the routine that we have in our lives? Should we keep on doing what we were doing every day normally when this war is happening, or is it time to put life on pause a little bit? And I believe that the wedding question is a reflection of that attitude, of that question, that dilemma. Should we just continue as if life is normal, or perhaps we should wait? It's interesting that of all the examples that the rabbis give to explain the severity of wartime and how each and everyone must go to war, they use a pasuk in Yoel that says basically, we break up weddings for weddings. Meaning the example, par excellence example for breaking for times of war, that everyone must go to war. Chazal give us the example of breaking up a wedding, as if to tell us this is not perhaps the time to get married. It's not the right thing. There's a Rambam in the Chut Melachim who tells us that a soldier going to war must not think about his family, about his wife, and about his children. There are two ways of looking at this. One way is to say that the chayal during this war, if he thinks about his family, he might be worried, might be concerned, he might not fight as well. So it's almost like a tactful thing. You should try to disconnect yourself from anything else and just focus on what you have to do. However, there's another way of looking at this. There's a Gemara that teaches us that when the Chayalim of Beit David HaMelech's soldiers went to war, their minhag was to divorce their wives. This is a very sensitive question that has been raised during this war, as it has been during other wars the past 75 years, whether or not married soldiers should somehow leave behind perhaps some kind of paper that gives permission for people to divorce their wives on their behalf. I'm not going to go into the whole discussion, but here again, the question of boosting morale came up, whether or not this is a good or bad for the morale of Israeli soldiers. But nevertheless, in the days of David HaMelech, they used to actually divorce their wife, not just not what we call ktav harsha, but rather a real get. They used to give their wives. That's how the Gemara explains why David HaMelech didn't sleep with a married woman, Bathsheba, because she was divorced to Uriah, because Uriah went to war, he divorced his wife. So that's how the Gemara explains that David HaMelech did not have relations with an Eshet Ish. But going back, some people say that the Rambam learned this halacha that you mustn't think about your wife and children during war from this Gemara, because the Gemara is saying when you go to war, you must disconnect yourself from your family, not because what we said before, because it's not good, because it's not helpful for the war efforts, but rather because a person must not see himself as an individual, but rather as Dosh Baruch Hu soldier. He is a soldier of the Tzibur, of Am Yisrael. He represents the Jewish people. He represents Dosh Baruch Hu. He's not fighting as a private citizen. He's disconnecting himself from the idea of being a yachid and not a representative of the Tzibur. I saw, by the way, that some people say, as a result, because of this idea, that Chayalim, when they come back from combat, from war, should not say Hagomel. I mean, the halach is that we pass that they probably should say Hagomel, but some people say no, they're not. Hagomel is only said when something happens to you, a miracle occurs to you as an individual, but you're not an individual during a war. You are representation. You are representing the tzibur, and the tzibur doesn't make Hagomel. It's an interesting idea. But going back to the Rambam, again, perhaps this is some kind of indication that during war, we dissolve families, right? We break up families. We don't make new families, as if to suggest that's really what we should be doing. So perhaps these two sources indicate that during war, maybe we should postpone weddings and not get married. However, it's very interesting that de facto, what did happen without anyone consulting anyone is that people got married. And I think there's something very beautiful about that. That many times when rabbis are not aware, not sure about what the halacha really should be, they tell people, go and see what the people are doing. And in this case, I think it's a very, very profound situation, which young men and women were going to get married. And these young men and women, some of them may be listening to the shir right now, or are fighting, or in the army, are not confused. I feel the confusion a lot of times is with us back at home, people who are reading the news, looking at the television, people who are discussing things at work. I think the soldiers themselves, when they are going to battle, when they see who the enemy is, when they understand who we're up against, I think it's very clear to them who the enemy is and what has to be done, as it is clear to them that the best response to those who wish to destroy us is to build, is to go on our lives. The soldiers that are fighting for us, they are fighting for us to be able to have a life of routine. So it's true that we should think, daven, learn, always think about what's going on there in Gaza, and ask Dosh Baruch Hu to protect them all the time, and think about them. But they are fighting so that couples could get married, so that people can have routine, that people can live a normal life. And I think what's important is to us acknowledge that when we do go out and do our sometimes silly daily routine activities, we should be aware that the reason that we are able to do so is because of the sacrifice of those who are fighting. And they themselves, by getting married, are giving the best response to our enemy. When you wish to destroy the Jewish people, when you want to burn down houses, the best answer is to build more homes, more families, more houses, to create batim of kedusha, of yirat shamayim, batim built on love, on respect, and on chesed, and all the values of what Am Yisrael stands for. That is the best response. And I think that itself is a source from which we can derive that it is the right time to get married, and weddings should go on, and we should have a simcha. We should have simchot b'Yisrael. We should have, we should build houses full of Torah v'yirat shamayim, and let Hashem families will bring children and make this country, make this people grow even more so. Tov, that was my little share for today. I know it's a little bit short, maybe perhaps, but Star just got off the plane, and I want to use the opportunity to wish all our alumni briut briut, habe briut, and those who are fighting right now, those who are in the army right now. The Kadosh Baruch Hu should protect them and watch over them, and we are full of thanks to them as they are now allowing us to learn Torah and to go on our daily routines. I also want to thank Rabbi Berman for all the hard work that he's putting into this, and I hope that his efforts his efforts really are successful for the yeshiva's future. B'ezrat Hashem, thank you for all those who are helping and donating and really helping the yeshiva to exist, and giving their time and their money to a beautiful operation like Eretz Hatzvi, which really believes in Torah in the modern world, of spreading the Torah to many students around the world who are a real example of what Torah is supposed to be. The Torah Kol Tov.